My name's Warren Ramsey, Chief Master Sergeant, United States Air Force, retired. I served from 1947 to 1971. I was born in Ayrshire, Iowa, actually at the hospital in Emmitsburg, and in 1930, April of 1930.
What were you doing before the war started?
I was actually in high school, and I actually went into the Air Force on basically a delayed entry program. I went in January of '47 and signed up, but then they gave me to graduate to come out of high school that June, and they gave me a couple of weeks. So I went the 1st of August of '47 on active duty. Did my basic training down in San Antonio at Lackland Air Force Base.
What was training like?
Well, actually, it wasn't too much of a shock for me because it seems I've ended up in some type of a uniform all my life, starting off with the Boy Scouts, then all in high school I was in ROTC. So I was familiar with the military and knew all of the basic commands and drill procedures and had qualified with weapons and everything prior, so there was no cultural shock.
And what was it that made you choose to go into the military and specifically into the Air Force?
Well, at the time, I thought it would be my best opportunity to see the world, and it was. And the reason I chose the Air Force was because they had so many bases in so many different countries worldwide that I knew I'd come close at least to getting someplace that I really wanted to be. I spent actually about 14 years in the combination. The military has a way of every few years of changing the names of things. I started off, it was Air Transport Service, then it went to MATS, Military Air Transport Service, and then it went to MAC, Military Airlift Command, and this was all with transports. And when I was stationed at Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii, at the outbreak of the Korean War, why that's what I was in at that time, was Military Airlift Command.
Heading into the military, did you think about the fact that you might go to war?
No, actually at that time, in fact, a lot of guys got caught after the end of World War II. Had only been over for 5 years. And so a lot of them thought the reserves and their guard would be a good place to be because no one dreamed that there would be anything happen any place in the world. They thought after everyone saw the results of World War II that they had had enough and were smart enough to avert and avoid any situations like that. So that was the last thing on anyone's mind, was being in a conflict of any type. The age we were, all of us in the Korean War basically were 20 years old. There were still, though, quite a few of World War II guys that were in naturally. But you're invincible at 20. You don't worry about things like, you aren't going to die. That maybe the other guy will, but it's not going to happen to you.
Did you receive any kind of specialized training?
No, of course, I went in at the time, it was still the Army Air Corps. So I actually went through Army basic training. So as far as, for instance, weapons familiarization, why we did the same thing as the Army. We had mortar training and heavy machine gun training and the carbine and the rifle and the .45. And so I'd had all of that, and there was no other, they did give us, in case we happened to be shot down someplace inadvertently, they gave us escape and evasion tactics and training, but that was, maybe a week course or something like that. So but really nothing particular. I was crew chief, flight engineer. At that time we were flying C-54s. And then continued on through the rest of the Air Force and spent another 12, 13 years with the C-124s in the same position.
And what kind of duties go along with that role?
Oh, just general in-flight monitoring. You made sure that you did maintenance on the aircraft. Anything that was needed fixing after you landed, you serviced the aircraft. just made sure she was ready to go. And fuel loads and oil, and you made sure that the in-flight lunches were put in the proper place and things like that. And when you serviced, why, you always threw on an extra 500 gallons for Mama and the kids, just in case something went wrong.
Where were you serving?
Well, at the time, I went to Hawaii at Hickam Air Force Base in 1949. And of course, Korea busted loose in June of '50. So we were flying out of, even prior to the war, we were flying up into Korea occasionally, delivering supplies and things like that. Our prime mission, we'd leave Hickam and do a little island hopping and then end up in Japan at one of the bases there, and then pick up whatever and take it up into Korea at the various bases. Our mission didn't change that much even after the war. We accelerated and did a lot more of it and carried more troops up in. And then, of course, as things progressed, we started bringing walking wounded, per se, from Korea down into the hospitals in Japan, and then transporting other patients from Japan back to, there was Tripler General Hospital in Honolulu, was a tremendous large Army facility, and we brought people back to there. In the beginning, it's just a normal job, but the things you remember, faces that you think, you'll bring back a wounded soldier, and you look at him and you say, gee, I think I remember carrying him into country 3 weeks ago. But of course it didn't happen that often, but you became bonded with them in just a matter of hours. So it was quite an experience. We think, a friend of mine that's in the organization here, I didn't become acquainted with him until after we joined the Korean War veterans here. But we got to comparing dates, and I knew that I was in country on my 21st birthday, and he was wounded and was evac'd on, and he thinks he remembers me from then. Now, 60 years ago, we all looked alike. But it's very possible that I flew him out of Korea into Japan 60 years ago.
So what kind of friendships and camaraderie did you form throughout the time of the war?
Well, we still have the outfit. I haven't kept in contact. I lost contact with the people out at Hickam because I went from there, came back to the States. I was only back here for about 5 months, and I rotated to Germany and was gone for 3 years. So I didn't keep too many contacts from back there, but the big outfit I spent in Utah for a number of years, and we have a reunion every other year. And there will be 200 or 300 of us gather for that. And again, there are people that have, of course, that were in the same situation I was back then. So we have stories to tell that we relate to, places we'd been that was the same with other people. But as far as individuals, no, I haven't maintained with anyone specifically that I was with back in those years.
Where were you when the war ended?
I was actually stationed in Germany. And of course, as long as you were on active duty at the time, it was just like World War II. You didn't have to actually be in a given theater to be considered part of as a Korean veteran. So even if I hadn't been in the beginning at Hawaii and into Korea, by being stationed in Germany in 52 to 55, why I still would have been considered a Korean War veteran. But there was very little. It was a quiet war, if you will, in as far as the civilians were concerned. There was very little publicity. In fact, I remember when I came back home in '51, why, oh, where you been? Well, in the Pacific, participating. Oh, there's a war going on? Yeah, there certainly is. The government at the time had pretty well, I won't say they censored the news media, but it was, their desire was that things weren't blown up to any extent. Actually, you know, it started just a little under 5 years from the time that World War II was over. And I think all the politicians were so afraid that if they declared another war, they would go ahead and every one of them would get thrown out of office. So that first it was a police action, and then it was a conflict, and it wasn't until about, oh, I don't know, 15 years ago or so that Congress finally got around to officially declaring it a war. But there was quite a, and as I say, in Germany, I think, gosh, things had been over a couple of, or the truce had been signed a couple of days before we even found out about it.
How did that feel, to have been a part of it and seen what things were like, and then to come home and have... And
be ignored? Oh, I don't know. I think, like most of the people, I just shrugged it off and said, oh, well, you know, it's their loss. They don't know the comradeships that we developed, and they don't know what, and they'll never know if you didn't participate, why. And unlike, you were really, really ignored more than anything. Unlike the poor guys coming home from, you know, when I left Vietnam, basically they told us, carry civilian clothes with you and get into the airport and change and get out of your uniform. Otherwise, you'll have people throwing whatever at you and calling you baby killer and so forth and so on because of the conflict with the Vietnam War. And none of that occurred from Korea. As I said, we were just basically ignored.
So after the Korean War, what made you want to stay in the military longer?
I found a home. I really enjoyed the military life. As I said, I enjoyed the travel. I've been on, fortunately with the Air Force, I've been in some great outfits. I've been on every continent. I've been in 24 different European countries. I've been on every island in the Pacific that you could put an airplane down on. Met a lot of wonderful people. I still correspond with, in fact, a lady back in the 60s that babysat for us in England. We still have Christmas cards every year. I was fortunate when I was stationed in Germany to get a German hunting license, and with a doctor, and he's my age, a doctor in Frankfurt, Germany, that I still correspond with. So worldwide acquaintances and just the opportunity, and really it makes you appreciate what you've got here at home. Seeing how the rest of the world, how they have to live and the things that the situations they have to put up with, why, makes you pretty proud to say, well, I am an American.
How did you stay in contact with friends and family back home?
Oh, normal snail mail, if you will, of course, and telephone. I'd call once a month home. The rates were quite reasonable at the time and everything, and so we had no problems there at all.
Can you tell me about the veteran organization that you're a part of now?
Well, I belong to, of course, the American Legion and the VFW, and I am commander of the Korean War Veterans Chapter 272 here in Rockford, Illinois. It's quite an honor. We have some 72 active members. We have a very active color guard. We have a program where we go out to the schools and present programs to any of the classes that are interested. And quite a few of them are. A couple of our high schools have had very active veteran interview programs, very similar to this one. And we've had quite a number of our people that go to that. So we're already booked for Veterans Day, of course, and for a couple of schools the first week in November. So we have semi-uniforms, and then we take the opportunity, of course, and we show the flag whenever we can.
How did your wartime experiences affect your life?
Well, I was fortunate enough that, of course, I was lucky, never wounded, ducked a lot. But unlike some of the troops that, have had some severe combat experiences and everything, I was fortunate. So mine, there were never any lasting after effects of any type whatsoever. You learn a great deal of empathy when you're traveling with wounded heroes, and I'll call them heroes because anyone, as your grandfather, we've always said, although this weekend I was with 2 Medal of Honor winners, which of course is certainly the highest award the nation can give and are certainly heroes, but in most cases, and most GIs feel this way, that our heroes are all, the majority of them from the wars are in military cemeteries. We aren't walking around. And so I was fortunate. I've never had any side effects or after effects.
What are some life lessons that you feel like you've learned from military service?
Well, I suppose probably about one of the biggest things, nothing is impossible if you work together as a team. You get situations that people would back off and say, oh, I can't do that. Say, no, wait a minute. You think about this. No, you can't. But you and I, we can. And that, and nothing is ever good enough. There's an old saying that good enough is ever the enemy of excellence. And so, believe it or not, in the military, we never, at least in my organizations, we never let things stand good enough. It was always, no, we'll do it and do it right.
Do you have any advice that you would like to leave for future generations?
Probably the biggest thing, I'm trying to think, General Washington at the time said, to paraphrase, said something basically that the country is only as great as reflected the way the populace treats its veterans. And that would be my biggest thing, is don't push the veterans aside. We don't want any handouts. We don't want anything on a platter, but give us our just dues.